this one here, and it's via voicemail.
My question is about John chapter 16, verse 7. It says, "Nevertheless I tell you the truth, it is expedient for you that I go away, for if I go not away, the Comforter will not come unto you. But if I depart, I will send him unto you." My question is, I believe we have the Comforter, the Holy Spirit, at all times. So why would Jesus send something to us that we already have?
So, Pastor Kent, here we have someone who's wondering about the Holy Spirit. Jesus saying that it was going to be sent, but according what he understood is that it was already here. So is this a little bit redundant? What does the Bible say?
Well, it's a good question, and the person asking the question makes a good point. But you know, the essential thing is that we can trust Jesus. When Jesus says that he needs to go away, and there's a blessing in that by sending the Comforter, we can take God at his word. We really can. And let me just explain what I mean there.
Sure.
When it's difficult to understand the incarnation, how God became flesh. You know, how do we understand all of how that worked? But we do know that God became flesh and became Jesus of Nazareth. And that changed things in our whole planet. Let me give an example of what I mean. When there's a lot of literature, Jewish literature, leading up to the time when Jesus came on earth. But there's one question, and they ask a lot of questions and they address a lot of things, particularly in Sabbath keeping. But there's one thing that they never address, and that is it a sin to be healed on Sabbath? Now, it wasn't a question because it had never come up before. But when Jesus came, all of a sudden, he started healing all these people on Sabbath. We've got records of it in all of the Gospels. Now, the issue here is that when Jesus was a person, he came and he healed. There wasn't a single person that he didn't heal that he had contact with. There was no one that he couldn't heal. He healed everyone who was available to him. But if we come to Acts chapter 3, and let's notice verse 2. So this is Acts chapter 3 and verse 2. And we discover something here about the limitations of just Jesus being the healer. Let's notice that it says, "And a man lame from birth was being carried, whom they laid daily at the gate of the temple, that is called the Beautiful Gate, to ask alms of those entering the temple." And so here's a man who'd been born lame. He was always daily laid at this temple gate. And he'd been there for a long time. And yet Jesus had never come face to face with this man. So even after Jesus died, rose, and ascended to heaven, this man was left unhealed until this day when Peter and John came to the temple. Now, Jesus had made the point. Let's come back to Acts chapter 1. In Acts chapter 1, and if we notice verses 5 and another one, just at this stage, Acts chapter 1, verse 5, it says, "For John baptized with water, but you'll be baptized with the Holy Spirit, not many days from now." And then he was interrupted, and Jesus comes back to this point in verse 8. This is Acts chapter 1, verse 8, and he says, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth." And so Peter and John were the recipients of this Holy Spirit, and they did healings that Jesus didn't do on earth. And then later in Acts, if we come to Acts chapter 14, Paul, the Apostle Paul, is the recipient of the Holy Spirit, and he's at this far-flung place called Lystra. And he's there, and if we look in Acts chapter 14, verse 8, it says, "Now at Lystra there was a man sitting who could not use his feet. He was crippled from birth and had never walked. He listened to Paul speaking, and Paul, looking intently at him, seeing he had faith, to be made well, said in a loud voice, stand up right on your feet. And he sprang up and began walking. So we can see here the multiplication of ministry. So
Yes.
the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. You know, people talk about the book of Acts. Acts isn't what the church did. Acts is what Jesus did through his followers who had received the Holy Spirit.
Wow, yeah.
So when we read these accounts, it multiplies far more than what one person could do, even Jesus.
Wow, that was a great explanation of how the Holy Spirit has helped those in the church beginning. I know, Dr. Cruz, anything that you feel we could be added to that?
I just feel the power in the words of God wanting connection with us. From the
Yes.
beginnings of Genesis 1, where the Spirit of God hovers over the face of the deep, he chooses to be connected in our history. Christ, who would walk on this earth, the God incarnate, and then to have the Holy Spirit, who is the powerhouse that is able to do these acts of goodness and these things that are described in Acts. Malachi 3:6 tells us that I am the Lord and I change not. And in each case, he desires connection with us. And that was a powerful description of what that looks like, Pastor Ken.